Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Jig Retro, where I'm going to be taking a look at my top 10 original Game Boy games. That's right, the massive brick one with the bogey green screen. Or if you literally purchased every single released iteration of the Game Boy, then also the super crisp screen on the Game Boy Pocket. That screen was much more grey and black. Actually, now that I think about it, I never did own the Game Boy Advance Micro. The downsize in the screen and the lack of backwards compatibility made it a confusing purchase and release for me. Unlike Nintendo, I won't be bundling the Game Boy Color games into this video at all. If you enjoy this video, then please take a moment out of your time to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, check out all my other content. I currently only have time to release a video a month and maximum 2 videos a month, so all these things will help get my videos exposed to the greater population. I think many more would actually enjoy these videos if they could just find me. In my personal video gaming history, the Game Boy release was absolutely massive. It was only the second video game console that I owned, and they seem to be in most households all round. I feel that despite it not exactly being the most technically superior handheld at the time, the price point and the battery life made it the true king. I mean, who was really up for hammering through batteries on their handheld gaming system? Yes, the screen nowadays is pretty much unbearable, but to be honest, back in the day it was still mighty impressive, and it was down to the amazing developers to keep it nice and simple and not overstretch the capabilities of the hardware. These games are simple perfection. So here goes, this is my top 10 OG Game Boy games list. And let me tell you, while I was making this video, it made me realise what a special little system this is, and a must for any enthusiasts of video game collecting. I'm going to tackle the honourable mentions first because I really don't want to disappoint. I think many people would really like to see these in their own personal top 10. They're just not quite for me. Pokemon Blue, Red and Yellow. I can really appreciate this series, and I have dipped into it to try it and catch that international addiction and obsession, but unfortunately as of right now I just don't quite get it personally. I know that it's a landmark classic game for the system, but I think the initial hype just missed me. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I haven't been able to get into any game in the Zelda series as of yet. I have tried a few. I just think that on the whole the objectives are a bit too vague. I know that sense of freedom in your adventures is one of the massive positives, but not for me. Nowadays, if I was to play it, then it might as well be the remake for the Switch, or at least the DX version for the Game Boy Color. Metroid 2. I really want to like this game as I absolutely love the series, and I'm sure that soon enough it will actually click and I will love it, but the times I've played it so far I haven't even beaten the first boss. I'm sure there's a very simple tactic that I just need to Google that would make these bosses easier, but honestly I just haven't got round to it. There's much better Metroid options out there available in my opinion. Dr. Mario. This definitely deserves to be in the top 10 list. I sunk hours into this back in the day, but honestly I do prefer playing this on the NES with the colours and the simple multiplayer. Therefore I decided to highlight some other games on this list instead. Number 10. Alleyway. I can hear the keyboards clicking away now. Alleyway in the Game Boy's top 10 games? Behave yourself. And honestly, nowadays I don't disagree with you. But back in the day, I used to play this game constantly. A basic Breakout or Arkanoid clone. I definitely owned much better games than this at the time, but there was just something in this simplicity and addictive gameplay that just kept me coming back for more. Number 9, Kirby's Dream Land. As you can tell from the games that have made the honourable mentions list on this system, I prefer a more simple, easy and shortish experience, and Kirby's Dream Land fits that exactly. Very youngster and gaming newcomer friendly, it is a gorgeous and imaginative platform game. It's actually the first Kirby game ever released, and it has become a hugely successful franchise for Nintendo. Number 8, Donkey Kong 94. This game was a real great surprise to me when I first played it. Initially, I assumed that it was a simple port of the arcade classic, similar to the NES port, but this game quickly changes things up to create a fantastically lengthy puzzle platform game in its own right. Nowadays, honestly, I prefer playing the Game Boy Advance version of Mario vs Donkey Kong, but before I discovered that game, I thought this game was phenomenal. Extra points go to the Super Game Boy integration of this game that includes a great looking border. Number 7, Kirby's Pinball Land. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's a simple, fun pinball title where you're flipping Kirby around the boards. Fun and addictive, especially on a coffee break. Number 6, Golf. Again, this is a game that has been bettered in a lot of ways with subsequent releases, such as Mario Golf on the Game Boy Color and the Mario Golf Advance. But if you are just looking at the original Game Boy, then this is a fantastic and challenging golf game that in a lot of ways actually offers more of an accurate challenge than the above golf games mentioned. Before you even play this one, make sure you Google the manual or something, because in this game you only point your shots. Distance is judged by the club that you choose, and the club's distances are written in the manual only. Number 5, James Bond 007. I love this game back in the day. It is a top-down adventure that has a cracking old-school James Bond style story. Released at the same time as the N64 monster Smash GoldenEye, this game on the whole fell by the wayside. It is a simple and shortish RPG style game that doesn't demand too much from the player. There's lots of fun interactions with characters from the James Bond universe, gadgets, jet setting and uncovering a sinister plot. It's all here. Number 4, Motocross Maniacs. A fantastically addictive motocross game that is not without challenge. A great pick up and play title which reminds me slightly as a more simple Trials game. Those games have been released on all modern systems over the past few generations. Using nitro jets at appropriate times in order to stay on track and ensure you pick up all of the bonuses is the main crux of this game. Waste or run out of nitro and you will get stuck or run out of time. Somewhat of a hidden gem from Ultra Games, or Konami as it would be known if Nintendo would have allowed publishers to release more than 5 games per year. This division of Konami was specifically made for that reason. Number 3, Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. Speaking of Konami, here is the Castlevania game of choice for this list. This surprised me a lot. This game is an absolute cracker, and I took my time to play through it to completion. I'd say that although it is old school Castlevania tough, it is much fairer than those games, and the simple 4 icon password system and unlimited continues always make you feel like you're making a good progress. This second game is a large improvement over the sluggish original Castlevania The Adventure. It reintroduces a couple of the sub-weapons that the series is known for and adds the Mega Man style element of choosing which level order. This game also features a stunning soundtrack for such a primitive system. Number 2, Super Mario Land 2 6 golden coins. This honestly could well be my favourite old school Mario game of all time. Extremely accessible and enjoyable with lots of variety in the levels and power-ups. All of the fun that you would expect from a Mario game. The graphics are great for such a basic system, and this game introduced us to Wario, who has now become a Nintendo staple with his own set of games. I also played a hell of a lot of the original Mario Land on the Game Boy back in the day, so I would suggest that if you prefer the original Super Mario Brothers over, say, Super Mario 3 or World, then definitely check that one out. Number 1. Obviously the most predictable game for the number 1 spot in the top 10 Game Boy games category would be Tetris. This is and always will be my favourite version of this game. The classic and timeless puzzle game that absolutely everyone enjoyed. The fact that absolutely everyone was addicted, from kids to adults to grandparents, is probably the main reason why you got a Game Boy for that Christmas back in the day anyway. The classic tunes continue to be earworms for people to this day. This game was the system seller, and the fact that it was a pack-in title for the console helped all the more. I hope you have enjoyed this video and that it has inspired you to take a deeper look into the original Game Boy's library. As you can see by my opinions and choices, if any game lasts longer than a couple of hours or is too challenging, then it's just not for me. I personally absolutely adore this video game system, and it's such a good little system to collect for. A fairly reasonable collection will still fit into a nice little drawer, or maybe even some Tupperware, console included. If you have any recommendations or opinions on any of the games that I've either put in or left out of this list, then please contact me down below. I'd love to hear from you. As a bit of collector advice, I would highly recommend starting your collection with a Game Boy Advance SP. That's because they're relatively cheap and fully backwards compatible with the entire Game Boy library, including original Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games. Also, the slightly primitive front lit screen really does help see these games quite clearly in comparison to the older systems in the generations. I personally have a gorgeous modded Game Boy Advance SP with a modern screen, which really, if you're going to take the gaming and the collecting a bit more seriously for this system, I highly recommend. I also, just because I've got a bit of a soft spot for this particular iteration, picked myself up an original Game Boy Pocket. I really did that just because, if I'm honest, if I'm out and about and have taken it with me and it ends up getting broken or lost, it's really not going to be that upsetting to me. Until next time, much love, please look after yourselves and each other and get your geek on with Jig Retro.